Hey, what's up, Speedy's Garage gang, and welcome back to the Speedy's Garage YouTube channel. Well, we got all of our answers on this last call number 7 car, and it did not disappoint. Let's jump right into it. So I've got some notes here so I don't mess any of this up because it's a lot to unpack. We've got 1,025 horsepower, 945 pound-feet of torque. That's on full E85. The car didn't end up being flex fuel like most of us thought it would. 0 to 60, 1.66 seconds. The world's quickest 0 to 60 production car. Very impressive. 2.004 Gs, and it ran an unbelievable 8.91 seconds at 151.17 miles an hour in the quarter mile. Now, I had sort of predicted it might be able to run an 8-second pass based on my prediction that it would have 1,000 plus horsepower. I thought it would be 1,009 was kind of the number. They ended up getting it to 1,025, and based on figuring out some weights and looking at an online quarter mile calculator, I had come up with about an 899. So they actually got an 891 out of it. Now, we don't know the conditions. We got to figure that out, what the weather was like and those types of things for it to run that fast. But 150 miles an hour is where you have to have a parachute. So they've actually taken a production street car and got it to a level of performance that it's technically going to have a parachute. And I sort of, knowing Dodge, when they did the Demon, it got banned from NHRA tracks for running 965 without a cage. Since then, the rules have changed, like I mentioned before, and now you can actually run down to 900 without a cage. So I figured they would try to clip just under that, just to say they did, and that's exactly what happened. The way they presented the reveal was a little strange to me. They did it at a drag strip, which I thought was a good idea, but they did it on a Monday. And they had this like weird, Tim Kuniskis, who's the CEO, was up there trying to give his presentation about the car, and they had a tractor running back and forth.
Sustainable energy powered muscle car. I'm serious. Ethanol fueled vehicles have a carbon footprint that's 20% lower than gas. But it's clean enough to keep us out of trouble. I'm not going to promise that for any of you that buy one, though. This is what happens.
Prepping the track at the same time, which that seemed a little bit weird. And then the helicopter, they brought it in on a helicopter and set it down. And timing of that felt strange. Now, this was all live, live online TV or whatever you want to call it. So I get that some of those things are a little bit hard to line up exactly in terms of chronological order, and lots of weird things can happen. But it seemed a little distracting to me, some of the stuff that they tried to do. And then the stands, like they showed the stands where people who got tickets were there to see the actual unveiling, and there was hardly anybody there. The stands were maybe a quarter, 25% full. And my wife even noticed that. Mrs. Speedy, she walked by and she was like, "Is that the reveal for the new car?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, Where is everybody? The stands don't even have anybody in them." And so that could have been because it was at 6 p.m. on a Monday night. Why didn't they do it at noon or 2 o'clock on a Saturday or a Friday afternoon when people were off work and would be excited to come over there and maybe be around for the weekend and take a look at the car? So I thought that was a little bit odd. Okay, like I said, it's 1,025 horsepower on full E85. It does have a flex fuel sensor in the fuel rail like we expected it would. And once it hits 65% ethanol, you get that full power. It makes around 900 horsepower on 93 octane. And I thought that was interesting. They didn't say 91 this time. It's 93 octane. So two things there. Number one, not everywhere can you get E85 from the gas pump like I can around here. I'll show you a little picture real quick. It's everywhere around here, and I'm very lucky and blessed to have a nice E85 brand locally that it looks like water in the, when you look at it in a jar, crystal clear, smells like moonshine, top-notch stuff. but not everybody's going to have that. And a lot of places don't even have 93 octane. They're 91 octane, so that'll be a little interesting. They're only going to do a red key only, and the power is controlled by the ethanol content. I think I mentioned E65. Once you get to 65%, that's when you get max power. And the Leprechaun is gone, thank goodness. I don't know what was up with all of that. I guess it ended up having nothing to do with the car itself. I assume they only used that creature for the hints and everything, the teasers that they gave us, because it happened to be the weekend of St. Patrick's Day. So I'm glad the Leprechaun actually ended up having not anything to do much with the logo or anything on the car. The logo is actually, and this is going to get into something we'll talk about in a minute, the logo is actually the Demon logo from 2018, but with a neck tattoo that says 170 on it. So I kind of like that. I like the logo, and they kind of gave him a neck tattoo, the 170, indicating it's a 170 proof engine, which stands for E85, and some of those new crate motors they put out have that same nomenclature. All right, so let's talk through some of those teasers and hints that they gave us. We knew it was going to be E85 when the Leprechaun put the IV in his arm, so that was pretty obvious. The density, the big Leprechaun and the little Leprechaun were on the scales, and he tipped over 7.1. That indicated you're going to get 7.1 more pounds of boost from the supercharger. A lot of people thought it would have to be based on the original Hellcat supercharger being 11 pounds, and they figured this one would be about 18. I didn't think so. I knew they were going to make 1,000 horsepower plus with this car, and I figured that 7.1 would be on top of what the Red Eye actually made. So Red Eye makes around 14, Demon makes around 14. Add 7.1 to that, you're getting right around 21 pounds of boost on this new car from a 3-liter supercharger. So that's a lot of mojo. The next hints were with the I can never say this, anemometer. And the 1532, I think, was the number for the airflow. I believe the 105 now was the throttle body size. You had the pulley size 3.02, and the 2.98 is probably the supercharger size in liters if you really broke it down to how big the supercharger is. They call it a 3-liter because it wouldn't make sense to call it a 2.98 supercharger. So those were all pretty good. The speed, when he jumps out of the helicopter, it goes way past 140. It was called tripwire. I kind of joked and said they would have to provide a parachute with the car if it broke the 150 mile an hour or hit the 150 mile an hour quarter-mile speed time, but I never dreamed they actually would. They are actually going to provide a parachute for the car through the direct connection catalog. And then, of course, we had that cylinder pressure teaser, which was pretty obvious, 2538. That's the cylinder pressure that the new motor can handle. They had to beef up a lot of that stuff in order to handle all the power it's going to make. All right, let's run through the good and the bad. The good, the features on it are pretty cool. I'll show you some of the images here that they put out about it. The dash is new with some new features in it. As the ethanol content of the fuel increases, there's a little icon on the dash. It looks like a gas pump with a corn stalk emblem on it. It starts off white when you're below 65% ethanol, and then once you cross that 65% ethanol mark, that icon turns blue, letting you know you have access to full power. The trans brake 2.0. One of the big things with the Demon, everybody kind of felt like the trans brake that the original Demon had was sort of a gimmick. It was real hard to use. If you were really trying to race and use it, it was hard to line up. And so most people just foot brake the car in the end. The new one is actually supposed to be very easy to use, and it's user programmable. So you can tell it how much torque to take out of the car, and you can bring it in a time ramp. So that's going to be really handy for people who actually take these cars out to race them. I've already mentioned it gets a 3-liter supercharger with a 3.02 pulley for 21 pounds of boost and a 105 millimeter throttle body. They had to basically improve almost everything in the engine. The article I read said I think the only thing stock still left in the engine, or I shouldn't say stock, original from the Demon or Red Eye, is the cam. Everything else was highly upgraded. They went to head studs. I'm not going to rattle all that off. You can log in online to like dodgegarage.com or somewhere and get all the specs. But the pistons and rods and everything are upgraded. They had to machine the heads a little bit different. You get colder spark plugs. So a lot of stuff had to be upgraded for them to reliably handle 1,025 horsepower. And you got to remember, they have to account for people who are going to do things that most of us would consider abuse. You're going to have somebody that gets one of these cars and goes out and just hot laps it, and never gives it a chance to cool off. So they have to really overbuild those engines, a little bit different than what I might have to do to mine, because I've got common sense enough that I'll make a couple of passes. I need to pull over and let the car cool off and get a little bit of a break. So their durability testing, I think, was their original problem. Tim Kaniska said they had actually had several motors fail as they were building up to this 1,025 horsepower mark. And they say that the fuel injectors and fuel system can flow 164 gallons per hour. I rolled that back, and I think that comes out to about a 1300 cc injector, which is similar to what I have in my car to run E85. And they're right there around that 50% injector duty cycle mark. So that's probably right. You know, the engine blocks, the Hellcats were orange, the Demon and the Red Eye were red. And now they're talking about this one, kind of weird, maybe because of the E85, they're going to be yellow. So the engine block on this car supposedly will be yellow. You're getting an upgraded diff. The current ones are 230 millimeter, the new one's 240. It's got new heat treating and some other machining differences in it that are going to make it 53% stronger. 43 spline axles that are also heat treated, and a 30% stronger drive shaft. And that allows this car to obtain a 1.29 60 foot. And to put that in perspective, the best I've ever gotten in this car in Go Man Go is a 1.42. So that's really getting it done on the 60 foot. So they beefed all of that drivetrain up to be able to handle that type of pressure. I'm really curious how much of these parts will be, or how many of these parts will be available in the direct connection catalog. And I'm hoping maybe some of them just bolt in to some of these older cars and we can get those upgrades. And the last thing that really blew me away is the projected MSRP, $96,666. Now that's not chump change. I'm not trying to say that's a cheap car, but for what you're getting, my goodness, an 8-second car that you could drive around the street, flex fuel capable, tons of cool features for $96,666. When people are having to pay $100 grand for a regular red-eye jailbreak, that seems like a pretty good deal. Now that also kind of points out that maybe those red-eye jailbreaks are overpriced right now. I've said for a while, when I got mine, the sticker price on it was $72. They haven't changed a ton. The red eyes have a stronger motor and a more horsepower, so that, you know, you're going to have to pay for some of that. But $100K for one of those always seemed a little odd to me. Now we're kind of seeing it. $96,000 for this car with all of its features and strengths and 1,000 horsepower. It's kind of pointing out some stuff there. Okay, let's talk about some options. So it comes with a bunch of stuff. You get the 6.2 liter D170 engine, 3 liter supercharger, yellow painted engine block, trans brake, has a 309 rear, 240 millimeter rear axle like I mentioned. The Brembo brakes are 4-piston with a yellow logo. I think the calipers are actually going to be black. They're putting Mickey Thompson drag radials on their same tire I run at the track on mine, but they're putting a 315/50/17 tire. That's the Mickey Thompson ET Street R. That's what goes on the back on a 17x11 wheel. Up front, you get an 18x8 wheel with a Mickey Thompson drag radial as well. You get the same Demon hood that they used before. There's some options to have satin black vinyl pieces probably put on, maybe paint, I'm not exactly sure. The big thing, 14 colors, and Go Man Go is one of them. Go Man Go. Tempted, not really. I like my car too much. But here's the crazy thing. You can get satin black painted hood is one of the options. It's $19.95. If you want the hood and the top and the deck lid, it's $34.95. And I like that they kept the options sort of limited. The base interior is cloth with a passenger and rear seat delete. That's base. If you want to add the passenger and rear seat cloth, it's $2 grand, which I wouldn't do. If you want the premium group, which gets you a nice stereo, you get Alcantara Laguna leather seats. I believe you get the stereo, subwoofer, probably stuff like that. It's $59.95. So call it $6 grand for that. That's the option I would check. I would probably get the rear seat just to have it, and then I would buy the rear seat delete separate like I did in Go Man Go and swap it out. That way I've actually got the back seat should I ever want to use them. The only other thing I see on here for options, get this, power sunroof. You ready? $10,000. So obviously they do not want you, or they're going to make it very, you know, if you want a sunroof, okay, but it's going to cost you $10,000 for a sunroof. They have a trunk dress kit, which I'm not sure what that is, for like $300. GPS navigation's $1,000. I don't know why you'd want that, because the stereo probably has Apple CarPlay in it, I'm sure. And you can get red seat belts if you want. They're $400. Wheels. The base wheel comes as a 17x11, as I said, or an 18x8 front, and they're forged aluminum. They have a carbon fiber 2-piece option, which I believe they said is carbon fiber ring with a titanium center, $11,500. And so far, everything we're seeing, the whole wheels as a set only save about 32 pounds, 34 pounds. But we got to remember that's rotational mass. You've heard me talk about that before. And the farther away you get from center, the more that matters. I don't know that it's worth $11,500, but if you got the money, why not? Now let's talk about some of the bad. The first thing is they called it a Demon. Now somebody's gonna say, well, it's a Demon 170. I don't think that's gonna matter. It's still a Demon, has a Demon hood. The logo's the Demon, it's just updated. In my opinion, and you had Tim Kuniskis, and I'll show you a little clip right here. He said the Demon would never come back. And he said, can you imagine how upset people would be that bought these cars, serialized, and now bring the Demon back? But here we are, the Demon has come back. And I hope this doesn't happen to anybody who bought a Demon and kept it as a collector. I don't collect cars, not something I would do, but I can see why somebody might want to do that. I'm afraid that now the original Demon will just be remembered as the little brother. And everybody's going to really remember this car. It's the last one, supposedly. We'll talk about that some in a minute, too. The last one, and it's a bad boy running 8-second quarter mile times or 890s. I mean, that's ridiculous. So I don't know what's going to happen. I feel like they could have easily named it something other than Demon, even used the same logo and everything, or just tweaked it just a little bit, and they would have avoided all that. And it would have kept Tim honest, because he could have said, we never made another Demon. He never said they wouldn't make a faster car than the Demon. He just said, we won't ever make another Demon. But now that's exactly what they did. Supposedly, they're going to do the same number of units as they did on the original Demon, which was 3,000 for the United States and 300 for Canada, for a total of 3,300. But there's some fine print. We're already in late March. They're behind on announcing this thing. Remember, this was supposed to be announced in SEMA back in November, and they had some trouble. So now we're behind. If they get production started in the summer, I don't know that they can produce 3,300 units before December 31st, 2023. And I'll tell you why that's important here in just a minute too. The rear flares only. I talked about that in one of my previous videos. There were some spy shots of one. I've seen it, and it doesn't look as crazy as I thought it would, but I don't know that I could get used to that. I feel like they could have done a little something different. They had to do something because they're putting that 17 by 11 wheel with the 315 tire on the back, but there are some aftermarket flares that are small. They just barely stick out on the edge, and they're like 1.5 inches. And I feel like they could have accomplished the same thing with something like that rather than that whole flare that goes all the way up to the quarter panel. And I'm really worried that we may never see one. The ADMs, or adjusted dealer markups, the stories are already starting to hit that they're marking them way, way, way up. Dealerships are keeping them for themselves, not even going to sell the allocations that they get. Dodge says, or Tim says, that they're trying to avoid ADM by if the car sells for MSRP, it will be bumped to the front of the production line, and you're more likely to get the car built in the time frame allotted before the end of the year. And if you charge an ADM at a dealership, they're supposedly going to bump those to the back. However, what's to stop a dealer from saying, hey, sign this right here that says we sold you this car at MSRP, and oh, by the way, this ball cap, you have to buy this ball cap from us for $75,000 in order to buy the car, and that's a separate purchase, and we're not going to tell Dodge about that. So some of that stuff's going to happen. It's unfortunate because I really feel like there ought to be policies and a way to avoid that. I'm all for a free market economy, but that kind of stuff gets a little bit ridiculous, and it ends up with just people really wealthy get these cars and package them away somewhere, and we never see them. And as an enthusiast, the enthusiast side of me wants to really see these cars out running around at events and at the drag strip. And that sort of brings me to my next thought. I'm fairly certain, so I've got friends that live around me that work for a car manufacturer. And one of them works on future models, future products. And he never, doesn't share anything with me because I'm sure he's under NDA, but he did tell me that the stuff that they're working on right now is 4 years out, 4 to 5 years out. And that tells me that Dodge, I'm sure, does the same thing. So the stuff that we're seeing right now are products that they had been working on for several years. And I think the original plan was to have a red-eye 170 probably, and have this 170 engine in a red-eye. They probably planned to do something like this Demon car. I don't know if they would have called it a Demon, but maybe they would, I don't know. But I think they were going to do that. And there are going to be several models if this platform could have continued for another year or two, because it's wildly popular. So now Dodge is basically canceling. This is the last year, if you believe what they're saying, this is the last year for these Hemi V8 Hellcat platform cars. And it's been one of their most popular models, and really kind of put them back on the map. I've been around these cars since 2009, And the best we had back then was a 425 horsepower SRT8 Challenger. You know, I had to build old Orange Crush because there wasn't anything to compete. So I built sort of what I thought, you know, what kind of turned into the Hellcat back then. It had a built motor, it had you know, ARP head studs and a supercharger and all the stuff. And then the Hellcat came out and it was a huge upgrade, so I got one of those. But I think these were intended to continue for a little while. And this gets in, I don't make it a political video, but this gets into some of the politics and policies that take place. Back in 2012, Obama put CAFE standards in place that would be hitting right now, starting in 2024, of, let me see, it was 54.5 miles per gallon. So that was where the CAFE average, that means if you look at a fleet of vehicles for Ford, Chevy, whomever, Dodge, the average fuel economy would have to be 54.5 miles per gallon. And that's a lot. That's a lot of miles per gallon. And you get into enthusiast cars that make a bunch of horsepower, it brings those CAFE numbers way down and they can't meet those minimums and they start getting penalized and fined. And that's why we're paying gas guzzler tax on these already, because they're not even meeting the 2022, 2023, you know, averages. Trump came in and he dropped that back down to 37 mile per gallon by 2026. So he was going to leave it, make it 37 mile per gallon all the way through 2026. And I think that's when we started seeing some of these cars coming back out, because now that average was lower and they had an opportunity to keep making the high horsepower cars for enthusiasts. When Biden came in, he changed it back to 49 mile per gallon by 2026 as a fleet average. And in years 2024 and 2025, it doesn't have to be 49, but it has to be an 8% increase over what the original mile per gallon values were. And Dodge looked at that and they said, there's no way we can make it. So that's why I mentioned a minute ago, these cars have to be built before December 31st, because on January 1st, that 8% increase goes in for 2024 and these cars can't do it. So that's a little bit disappointing. In my personal opinion, I wish the government would stay out of things like this and just let the market decide. If an electric car is awesome, let the companies build them, let people buy them or not. If people want V8s and enthusiasts want high horsepower fun cars, build them and let the market decide. If they don't sell, quit making them. That's fine. But if they sell, let us have the opportunity to buy them. If there's a little bit of a penalty, maybe put a mileage penalty. I don't drive mine all the time. I maybe drive mine 3,000 or 4,000 miles a year. So my carbon footprint in my car on 3,000 or 4,000 miles per year is going to be probably less or equal to somebody that's getting 40, 50 miles per gallon in their car that they drive 15,000 miles a year, right? So they need to give us an option if I want to have a really fun car that I take out as an enthusiast. So that's really it. Dodge does some strange things. They say they won't make the Hellcat Durango anymore. They make the Hellcat Durango again. They said they would never make another Demon. They made a Demon again. Back in 2008, the SRT8 Challenger was supposed to be a one-year thing, and then you see what happens. Now it led all the way up to the Hellcat. So I don't take them for their word very often. And them saying they're getting rid of the Hemi V8, I hope that that's a result of the current CAFE requirements, and that maybe we get some different administration in that changes those things. And I'm not saying I want to, pollute the environment or anything like that. I think we need to find a happy medium where enthusiasts like us, if you're watching this channel, you're probably one of them, can still enjoy a high-powered car and have the opportunity to go and purchase something like that. So I'm hoping that they've kind of kept some stuff in the background that they can pull out if things happen to change. But we'll see. I got to say, I'm a little depressed and a little sad to know that this is the end. I have really enjoyed these cars. And I'm not a Dodge fanboy. Some people get upset with me when I'm really, really real in these videos, but I tell you exactly how I feel, and I try to be realistic about it and not be a fanboy, because when Dodge does something that doesn't make sense, we should tell them that. And I've made a bunch of friends, some of the best friends of my life, as a result of these cars, and so I'm going to keep mine and be positive about it and have a good time with it. I just hope something comes out in the future that's as good or better. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Be sure to check us out on Instagram. It's at Speedys_garage, as well as the website, www.speedysgarage.net. And hopefully, I see you out there with your Demon 170.